The other stock that we need to address here is NVIDIA, because this is the worst week since November of 2018. It's been a no good, very bad week, as you know, down 17%. Leads me back to Jimmy Jitters. You trimmed NVIDIA. You trimmed NVIDIA now, too?
I'm sorry, that was pretty good.
Dude,
Yeah, I did. Look, the stock's been a home run. I mean, what has it done? A triple for me in about 15 months? And
maybe you should trim it at somewhere around here, not like after it falls off the ski slope and gets hit with the avalanche. I'm
going to say this again. It's up like 3 times in 15 months, and I'm going to give full credit to Josh, who's been in it forever and is up like 1,000 times in it. But I have absolutely no hesitation on this. I'm amused, and I'm amused by the pushback on it. Still own it, but I think we have to take seriously the possibility, not the certainty, the possibility that CapEx, maybe not 2025, but 2026, starts to disappoint. I'm not saying that's definitely the case. If I thought that were definitely the case, I wouldn't have a position in it at all. But I think the possibility has increased over the last week that CapEx, particularly in 2026, will be lower than expected.
27 times earnings, though. This is the cheapest you've been able to buy forward earnings. This is the cheapest you've been able to buy NVIDIA, probably since I've been aware of the stock.
I'm not hating on it.
Not quite in Jenny Harrington territory, but it's in Jim Lebenthal territory.
I mean, the PEG ratio, I think, is probably less than 1.
Why aren't you buying more? Why is this a trim down 17% on the week and not a buy more of what still is at the forefront about where this whole movement's going?
I think everybody in the market, particularly in the leadership names, at which the top of which is NVIDIA, got a shot across the bow. I think that there's a shot across the bow, and when you take a shot across the bow, the next move shouldn't be to continue on so that you take a shot in the engine room and get sunk. It's a time to pull back and think about it. I'm trying to find different ways to say the same thing, which that this is just risk management. I'm not hating on the stock. I agree with the valuation comments that Josh has made. I do think, though, that the probability that earnings disappoint has been brought forward in time from what might have been a 2027 event. So I can't say with certainty. I'm not actually hoping to be right. I still have almost a 4% position in NVIDIA.
So even I knew NVIDIA hadn't done well, but I even surprised myself finding that data that NVIDIA, for all the hype it's getting, has really been a spectacularly average stock for about 9 months. Are so-called value stocks finally in love again?
Well, I'd say, for one thing, NVIDIA, a lot of NVIDIA's tougher time really has come this week. And it does speak to the fact that when you have a company where the vast majority of its value is based on growth expectations for the future, that there's a vulnerability there if people change their mind about what they think the future is going to be. So NVIDIA is a very high quality company. They have an amazing franchise. The reason why they have been vulnerable is because people have assumed that the world is just going to continue to want more and more and more of those chips at extraordinarily high gross margins for them. And suddenly that may not be so true. It is a tricky problem. You've got an amazing company with amazing products. They might not be an amazing investment because that valuation is high. People, maybe not who invested in June in NVIDIA, but the people who invested in 23 or 22 or, luckily enough in, 2004 in NVIDIA have made fortunes from it. And the thing is, for most stocks, you're not going to make a fortune. But that's okay, right? The way you make money in the long run is compounding, and the stories we get that really resonate are the companies who have done something very abnormal.
And that brings us to NVIDIA. Where does it leave them? By the way, those shares, which are down 15% this week on the DeepSeek news, actually got a little bit of a fill up, kind of, on the this news of OpenAI's latest funding, massive funding round, which is interesting. It's down about 1% today. What do you do with it?
Well, at some point, Microsoft is going to stop wanting to overspend on data centers. And so that's going to have to come out of NVIDIA's pocket. There will still be customers for NVIDIA, the ones that want to build the greatest data center ever, the vanity-driven investors like Elon and Zuckerberg and Masa. they're the ones driving the spend right now. Increasingly, the bigger customers, which is Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, are going to moderate their spend and use more of their own chips in their data centers.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hard for NVIDIA to keep anything close to the current growth rates.
Bryn, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about NVIDIA. It's been a horrible week, as you know. You've been a longtime shareholder of this name. We're talking about one of the worst weeks in many, many years for NVIDIA. How are you thinking about it today? You've had, 72 hours or so now to process this news about DeepSeek, what it's going to ultimately mean. You heard some CapEx numbers that are still being held to by a couple of the hyperscalers.
This, to me, is a sentiment shift. And as we've talked about, ad nauseum, the stock's been flat really since June of last year. You've now switched negative, where even though if I look forward, it has a 30 PE, it's still probably going to grow revenues 40+% this year. The market is saying that we have had a pivot in the market, sentiment shifted, and we think people are going to do more with less. Now, as an investor, you have to look at it and say, do I think those market expectations are right or wrong? Right now, to me, what I want to see, the stock has support at 116. It's got to build a base here because now it's really a broken chart technically. And so I respect that. And so I want to see this stock base out here. I sold some calls. I already had some 168 calls that I had sold before the sell-off. So I can probably close those out at a large profit. But I think it's not going to be a revenue generating trade until at least earnings come out in February. But in the meantime, you really got to watch the technicals because it does look very weak.
Yeah, we have to wait a minute for these earnings. We always need to remind people of that as you get the flurry of mega caps, and then many weeks later you get NVIDIA. So we're not going to have some real answers and commentary, we don't think. There's a quiet period, obviously, ahead of earnings, so you're not going to really get a good picture until the numbers and the guidance and the call actually happen. So let me just ask you about NVIDIA before I let you go. Do you feel like enough dust has settled now that you have a clearer view of what all this means this week?
Yeah, all the DeepSeek stuff. I mean, look, we've been of the view that I don't want to knock DeepSeek. They've actually done some really phenomenal things. The models are great, but I don't think what they did are miracles or secrets to the rest of the industry. The whole $5 million number was blown completely out of proportion. And I'm firm in the belief that over time, if efficiencies are getting better, it drives adoption. And frankly, I think we need efficiency improvements. We've gotten them. Inference costs have come down 1,000x over the last 2 years. Like GPU performance has gone up by leaps and bounds. We need this sort of stuff if we're going to get to the types of compute levels that I think we need if AI is really going to be prevalent. So I'm firmly of that belief. Now, clearly it's impacted NVIDIA because there is a lot of narrative now that's out there, and it's hard to prove a negative. You can't prove it won't be an issue. But I do think after the decline in the stock, like it's starting to look quite attractive down here. It was $120 give or take, and I do think even if there's a little more noise over the next like couple of quarters, I actually think it's looking attractive at $120. I think that the whole DeepSeek thing, all the fear and uncertainty and doubt's been a little overdone.
All right.
NVIDIA is a little bit trickier right now.
Why?
Well, NVIDIA started to break down. It had a big high volume breakdown on Monday. It closed below the 200-day moving average for the first time in about 2 years. And it does have quite a few bearish trend signals right now. So NVIDIA is much more cautionary.
Are there levels that you're watching that could, mean that NVIDIA is headed lower? Levels that it would have to break in order to head lower?
Sure. 115 is the key level right here. So 130 was prior support. It went through that pretty quickly on Monday. So right now, 115 is really the last line of support. So we're holding above that right now, about 124. But if 115 breaks, it probably brings 100 into range.
It's very symmetrical here. 115 on the downside for NVIDIA for a breakdown, 116 to the upside on Starbucks for a breakout here. Where do you stand on
Easy to
either?
figure that out. Well, Tim's been bullish on Starbucks. I'll let him talk. It broke a 4-year downtrend. And then NVIDIA, we talked about this. Go back to last March, engulfing pattern. Stock went down 28%. Happened in June, went down 35%. Same thing happened the day after earnings when it made an all-time high, 153 and change, closed lower, and it's been going lower effectively ever since. So today was a good day, closed higher. I get it, but it's under pressure for sure.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. The S&P finished the day up about 0.5%, and NVIDIA finished the day up about 0.8%. It has been a challenging week for NVIDIA stock, as was said many times in the clips you just watched. And so I just briefly want to go over three things. I want to reiterate my thoughts about DeepSeek in case you missed it this week. I want to highlight a potential short-term risk that I see. And then I want to look ahead to the future. All right, so we can't deny that DeepSeek's R1 is an impressive technical feat. I'm not denying that. At the same time, I am not fully convinced that all of the claims we've been told about DeepSeek are true. I seriously doubt that a team was able to build an LLM comparable to the top LLMs in the US with only a $6 million budget and old NVIDIA hardware. Rather, I think DeepSeek likely had a budget that was much larger than $6 million, and I think they likely have tens of thousands of NVIDIA H100s that they're not admitting to publicly. Let me once again share this short clip of Scale AI CEO from last Friday in case you missed it.
You know, the Chinese labs, they have more H100s than people think. You know, and
these are the highest powered NVIDIA chips that they were not supposed to have.
Yes. My understanding is that DeepSeek has about 50,000 H100s, which they can't talk about, obviously, because it is against the export controls that the United States has put in place. And I think it is true that, you know, I think they have more chips than other people expect, but also on a go-forward basis, they are going to be limited by the chip controls and the export controls that we have in place.
The main question is whether or not DeepSeek has tens of thousands of H100s. If they do have tens of thousands of H100s, which I think they do, then would mean that the sell-off we saw in NVIDIA this week was an overreaction and unjustified. Really quick, I also want to address Microsoft's CapEx guidance in case you missed the video I posted yesterday. Microsoft did not say that CapEx would be less in fiscal 2026 than it was in fiscal 2025. Rather, Microsoft CFO said that the growth rate of CapEx would be less in fiscal 26 versus fiscal 25 because Microsoft had to spend a lot of money up front on things like land construction and utilities to construct the actual buildings for many of their data centers. But in fiscal 2026, many of those facilities will be fully constructed. And at that point, Microsoft's CapEx spend will shift away from those external costs and shift more towards short-lived assets inside of the data center, such as CPUs and GPUs. That is good news for NVIDIA. Now I want to mention one potential short-term risk to NVIDIA that I see so that you won't be caught off guard. I want to talk about potential tariffs on NVIDIA chips. We don't know for sure what these new tariff policies will look like. And for all we know, maybe there won't be any tariffs on NVIDIA's chips at all. I don't know. But we need to talk about the possibility of tariffs because prior to the news about DeepSeek, I was of the opinion that the administration would go easy on tariffs on NVIDIA chips because they want the US to be the leader in AI and therefore US-based companies must be able to easily access NVIDIA's latest chips. But then the news about DeepSeek came out, and now I do wonder if the administration may seek new tariffs that focus on AI chips after the president's recent comments about tariffs on semiconductors. I just want you to be prepared if news comes out about tariffs on AI chips, because that would put some short-term pressure on NVIDIA stock. I think NVIDIA will be fine in the long term either way, but I just want you to be prepared for this possibility just in case. I think we are likely to hear more about the administration's new tariff policies in the very near future. Now looking ahead to the future, we have some things to look forward to. We have NVIDIA earnings on February 26th, and then NVIDIA's GTC March 17th through the 21st. I seriously think that GTC will be more of a market-moving event than CES was. CES was focused mainly on consumers, whereas GTC is where we are likely to get news about NVIDIA's products inside the data center, which is where NVIDIA makes the majority of their revenue. We may learn more about Rubin and possibly even the generation after Rubin. In the short term, we may have some volatility if we get news about tariffs. Long term, though, I think NVIDIA is still looking good as Blackwell starts ramping in volume and GTC is on the horizon. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.